I never thought my own parents would look me in the eye and tell me that my basic comfort in the home I paid for didn't matter. But there I was, standing in my own living room while my father laughed and told me, "It's just a chair you can stand. Stop being so dramatic." They had invited their entire extended social circle over to my house without asking. And when I came home from a double shift at the hospital, I found my father sitting in my specialized ergonomic recliner, the only thing that helps my chronic back pain, while my mother had piled her friends' coats and bags on every other available surface. When I asked him to move because I was physically shaking from exhaustion and pain, he didn't just refuse. He mocked me in front of 12 strangers, claiming that since they raised me, everything I owned was technically theirs anyway. Was I wrong for what I did next, or would you have reached your breaking point too? I need you to listen to the whole story before you judge me, because this wasn't just about a piece of furniture. It was about years of entitlement that finally hit a brick wall. To understand how we got to that moment, you have to understand the dynamic I grew up with. My parents, Robert and Diane, have always subscribed to the "what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine" school of parenting. I am the oldest of three, and from the time I got my first paper route at 12, my earnings were treated like a family tax fund. If I wanted new shoes, I had to buy them myself, but if my younger brother wanted a new gaming console, my parents would suddenly borrow the money I'd saved up from my bedroom drawer and tell me that family helps family. I worked 3 jobs through college to avoid student loans, while they spent their savings on luxury cruises and told me that struggling would build my character. They never contributed a dime to my education or my first car, yet they bragged to all their friends about how successful they had raised me to be. About 2 years ago, I finally hit a point of relative financial stability. I'm a nurse practitioner, and I work incredibly long hours, often on my feet for 12 to 16 hours at a time. Because of a spinal injury I sustained while lifting a patient a few years back, I have to be very careful with my physical health. When I finally bought my own house, a modest but beautiful 3-bedroom bungalow, I spent a significant amount of money on a high-end medical-grade recliner. It's not just a chair. It's a piece of equipment that uses heat and specific positioning to decompress my spine so I can actually sleep at night without being in agony. My parents, on the other hand, had recently made some poor investment choices. They decided to downsize by selling their house, but instead of buying something smaller, they spent the equity on a massive RV and traveled for a year. When the money started running low and the RV needed expensive repairs, they came knocking on my door. They didn't ask to stay. They informed me they would be moving into my 2 guest rooms for a few weeks while they looked for a new apartment. Against my better judgment, and because I still felt that deep-seated guilt they had spent 20-odd years installing in me, I said yes. I even went as far as to draw up a formal lease agreement with a nominal rent of $1 just to protect us all legally, which they laughed at and signed without reading, calling me a cold corporate robot. Those few weeks quickly turned into 6 months. They didn't pay the dollar, they didn't help with groceries, and they treated my home like a 24-hour concierge hotel. I would come home to find the kitchen trashed, my laundry moved to the floor so they could wash their rugs, and the thermostat cranked up to 80 degrees. But the breaking point happened last Friday. I had just finished a grueling 48-hour weekend rotation. I was exhausted, my back felt like it was being poked with hot needles, and all I wanted was to sit in my chair, turn on the heating element, and zone out. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw 6 cars I didn't recognize. I walked inside to find a full-blown dinner party in progress. There were people I hadn't seen in years, and people I'd never met in my life, all drinking my expensive wine and eating the meal-prepped food I had made for my upcoming week. My mother was in the kitchen acting like the grand hostess, and my father was dead center in the living room, enthroned in my recliner, holding court with a beer in his hand. I walked over, trying to keep my voice low so as not to cause a scene, and whispered, "Dad, I'm in a lot of pain and I really need to use the chair. There are folding chairs in the garage if you need more seating." He didn't even look at me. He just took a sip of his beer and said, "Don't be rude, we have guests. Go sit on the floor or go to your room." I told him again, "Dad, this isn't a joke, my back is spasming. I need the medical chair." That's when he raised his voice so the whole room could hear and said, "It's just a chair you can stand. You're young, stop being so dramatic and go get some more ice for Mr. Henderson. The whole room laughed. My mother chimed in from the kitchen, telling me I was being an embarrassment and that I should be grateful they were livening up my boring house. I stood there, vibrating with rage and physical pain, looking at these people who were enjoying the fruits of my hard work while actively mocking my physical suffering. It wasn't just about the chair. It was about the fact that they had never respected a single boundary I had ever set. They thought because they were my parents, my life was just an extension of theirs. So I took a deep breath, walked into my office, and grabbed the folder. Before I show you what I did and how I ended this once and for all, I want you to really think about this. I was being treated like a stranger in a house I paid for, by people who weren't even paying the $1 a month they promised. I had been the good daughter for 30 years, and it got me a backache and a room full of people laughing at me. Before I tell you about the confrontation that changed everything, I want you to pause and comment below. Would you have let it slide to keep the peace, or would you have blown the whole thing up right then and there? What would you have done in my shoes? I walked back into the living room, but I didn't go to the kitchen for ice. I walked straight to the TV, turned it off to get everyone's attention, and then walked over to the lamp next to my father and clicked it off too. The room went silent. I looked at my father, who was turning bright red, and I said, "The party is over. Everyone who does not live here needs to leave in the next 5 minutes, or I am calling the police to report a mass trespassing." My mother started shrieking about how I was ruining her reputation, but I didn't look at her. I looked at the guests and told them, "I am a healthcare worker who just worked 2 days straight. These people invited you to a house they do not own, to eat food they did not buy, and they are currently refusing to let me use my own medical equipment. If you stay, you are complicit." You've never seen a room clear out so fast. Once the door clicked shut behind the last guest, my father stood up, finally vacating the chair, and started screaming. He called me ungrateful, a spoiled brat, and told me that he should have disciplined me more as a child. He told me that as long as they lived there, they had a right to use the common areas however they saw fit. That's when I pulled out the paper. I held up the lease they had signed 6 months ago. I said, "You're right, Dad. You do have rights as tenants, but you also have obligations." I pointed to the clause they had laughed at. "According to this lease, you agreed to pay $1 a month. You haven't paid a cent. It also states that no unauthorized gatherings of more than 4 people are allowed without written consent from the landlord. You just had 12. And most importantly, there's a termination at will clause for non-payment and breach of terms." My mother tried to snatch the paper, but I pulled it back. I told them, "I'm not your daughter right now. I'm your landlord. And as of this moment, you are being served with a 30-day notice to vacate. If you aren't out by the 1st of next month, I will file for a formal eviction which will stay on your record and make it impossible for you to rent anything but a park bench." My father tried to bluster, saying I couldn't do that to my own flesh and blood. I just looked at him and said, "You told me it was just a chair. Well, this is just a house. You can find another one." The next month was hell. They tried everything. They called my siblings, who tried to guilt-trip me until I offered to let my parents move in with them, at which point my siblings suddenly went very quiet. They tried to sweet-talk me, and when that didn't work, they resorted to freezing me out and leaving the house even messier than before. But I didn't waver. Every time they tried to argue, I simply referred to the lease and the upcoming move-out date. On the final day, I actually hired movers to help them get their stuff back into their RV because I wanted them out so badly I was willing to pay for it. As they were driving away, my dad leaned out the window and told me I was dead to him. My mother just cried and said she didn't know where I went wrong. But as soon as that RV cleared the driveway, for the first time in 6 months, I felt like I could breathe. I went inside, locked every door, changed the security codes, and sat in my chair. The heat felt better than it ever had before. It's been 3 months now. We haven't spoken. My siblings say I'm cruel, but they still haven't offered to take them in. My back is doing much better, and my house is finally a home again. I learned that you can't set yourself on fire just to keep people warm who wouldn't even hand you a glass of water if you were parched. Setting boundaries with toxic family is the hardest thing you will ever do, but it is also the most necessary. If I hadn't pulled out that lease, I would still be sleeping on my own floor while my parents treated my life like their personal playground. Sometimes, being the villain in someone else's story is the only way to be the hero in your own. If you think I did the right thing by standing my ground, or if you've ever had to evict a family member, please share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how you handled it. Like this video if you were on my side and think I made the right call, and make sure to subscribe for more stories of people finally finding their backbone. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I'm curious to see if anyone thinks I went too far. I'll see you all in the next story.